Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Chatham Select Board meeting of February 21st, 2023. Let the record show the meeting started promptly at 5:30 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2023, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as is possible. First item of business this evening is a roll call. I'll go down the line here. Mr. Nicastro.
Present.
Ms. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Shell.
Present.
Mr. Metters.
Present.
And Mr. Dykens is present as well. Second item of business is to move and approve the minutes of February 9th, 2023. A motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any notions, edits, suggestions, comments? I see and hear none. Great. Mr. Metters, what say you?
I say aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nicastro?
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Next item is to move and approve the minutes of February 14th, 2023. A motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Metters. And a second by Ms. Davis. Comments? Yes, Mr. Nicastro.
Yes, I had, thank you. I had two minor ones. First on page 2, at the bottom, there's a motion by me. The word "of" should be stricken. It should say petition to place anchors and guys. And also on page 7, up at the top, page, the very first line, it says the moderator had made a recommendation. I would like to replace recommendation with the word suggestion.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Nicastro. Any other edits, comments, and/or suggestions? Okay, Mr. Nicastro, what say you?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair abstains. He was not here. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda are public announcements and/or agenda item requests. Are there any agenda item, public announcements first by anybody on the select board? Mr. Shell?
Agenda item?
Yeah, or agenda item.
Yeah, I just want to take us back to 2 weeks ago when we spoke about the motion to approve the donation of land at 1610 for a new COA facility. At the time, I proposed, subject to better information, joining with that as a separate article, the conversion of the existing facility at 193 Stony Hill to affordable housing in a multi-family the existing building. We agreed that we would wait for Select Board member Nicastro to return. He was absent that evening, and things intervened. I just would like to see to it that we have it on the agenda next week. This is an integral part in my mind, and I think a lot of people out there who've had a chance to think about this, of the overall project, including 1610, the new COA facility. That conversion offers a potential for very substantial savings and/or subsidy, so to speak, of the total project in the vicinity of more than $1 million and maybe $2 or $3 million. So I think they really belong together, not as a single article, but as part of a package project. And I would just like to see us have warrant articles for approval next week that would include repurposing the property, rezoning if necessary, and reserving funding that's adequate for the design and construction planning of that refurbishing of that building, excuse me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And yeah, it's was intended to be on the 21st, but we'll absolutely have, or tonight, I should say, and we'll absolutely have it on next week's agenda. Understand that, you know, it'd be nice to have them tied up together and understood together, because I think it's very important. Okay. Any other agenda item requests from the Select Board? Any agenda item requests from anybody here presently and or online? I see no hands up. Any announcements from anybody online? Any announcements here? Okay. I see none. Okay, we'll go on to our public comments on our business agenda. This evening, we have a report out from the Finance Committee, their preliminary recommendations. Joanne Sprague is going to present those on the part of the Finance Committee. I don't believe those have been circulated, so comment will be difficult to make. But we have a budget review of a whole bunch of different articles. I'm not going to list them all. Those that are interested probably have already seen them. Then we have a Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission nomination, and then we have some committee appointments as well. So that's our business this evening. Any comments from the public on our business agenda this evening? Okay, I do see none, so let's make sure I can see all the little hands and faces here. Okay, that being said, we'll move right on to our business agenda, and the first item, as I mentioned just a second ago, is Ms. Sprague is going to give us an update, or I should say the preliminary recommendations from our Finance Committee. We did receive a memo from Mr. Daniel titled Our Perspective on the Proposed Fiscal Year 24 Budget, and I believe Ms. Sprague is going to give us a summary of it. So
Yes.
off to you, Joanne. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Joanne Sprague, Vice Chair of Chatham's Finance Committee. I'm here representing our chairman, Stephen Daniel, who has a really terrible cold tonight, with our annual report to you on the committee's collective thoughts on the administration's budget for fiscal 2024. First, the chairman wants me to extend our thanks to the town manager, our finance director, and all town staff members involved in the development of this FY24 budget. This budget shows an emergency from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic and the challenges we'll have getting back on track to pre-pandemic levels while enduring a prolonged inflationary fiscal climate. The new operating budget at $37.7 million represents a 7.6% increase over last year's figure. Outstanding in this new budget is the proposed 8.5 additional full-time employees at an annual cost of close to $600,000. Notwithstanding some concern over the magnitude of the proposed hires, we are willing to support this recommendation. The committee is not supporting the Chamber of Commerce request for a 10% increase in their town-funded budget. We encourage the Chamber to consider a dues increase upon its members rather than an increase from the Chatham taxpayers at this time. On the capital needs, the committee is concerned that the list of this year's capital needs looks like a figure of $44 million. This includes outdated figures for our Council on Aging facility, estimates for water treatment, a belt filter press, improvements at the transfer station, PFAS mitigation, and dredging, and there's some other items too. With every $100,000 costing our taxpayers a penny on the tax rate, decisions about funding these projects will be critical to our taxpayers, as well as critical to maintaining our AAA bond rating. One capital request that we are withholding judgment on at this point is the request for a surf-capable rescue boat. It seems prudent to first develop a policy on this issue before pursuing funding. As representatives of the Chatham taxpayer, the Finance Committee is not supportive of changing the town's financial policy of holding free cash from a range of 3 to 5% of the operating budget to an only minimum of 3 to 5%, minimum of 3 to 5% of the operating budget. In the words of Chairman Daniel, excess free cash, by design or otherwise, results in a tempting pool of unallocated cash simply waiting for policymakers to find a purpose for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The Finance Committee looks forward to working alongside all of you as we work to create a budget this year that will satisfy our taxpayers and continue to build on the image that we want Chatham to present to the world.
Thank you, Ms. Sprague. That was pithy. You promised that, so I really do appreciate your brevity. Hopefully, you'll stick around long enough to field some questions from the members of the Select Board. That'd be great.
If you have any questions.
I think Mr. Nicastro has a couple, as do I.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Joanne. Appreciated the
Welcome.
report, and I appreciated Stephen's written report, which I hope we can post it on the website for the.
It's beautifully written and much more in detail than what
Yes.
I've mentioned here tonight.
Yes, he's an excellent writer. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I like the approach you've taken on the surf boat, which I'd like to support, but I think we should probably do that due diligence first before we make a firm commitment. And hopefully, I think we're anticipating that we could be eligible for 75% grant funding for that, so that would be a good thing.
Yes, not to say that eventually we would look at it
Yeah.
unfavorably, but we need to know what policy issues are going to result from changes like that, what about our relationship to the Coast Guard, and I'm sure it's not as easy as appropriating money and buying a
Exactly.
surfboat. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, it's
And
the
we
lo-
would like to see the selectmen decide what kind of policy they have going forward about, do we forever want a surfboat to replace what the Coast Guard hasn't offered us this year?
Yeah, I think it has significant implications in terms of our relationship with the Coast Guard and
Of course,
so
yeah.
forth. I appreciate the support for the staff additions. I mean, we wrestled with that here, and I'm sure your committee did as well. I know we don't have numbers yet on the senior center, but speaking as liaison, not just to your committee, but to the Council on Aging, and I know you've been very supportive personally of senior
Mm-hmm.
center in the past. I hope that,
But not everybody on our committee is. We have
No, I know.
conflicting ideas on that so far, so we need more information
Yes.
and an update on
Yeah.
if we're going forward with this, with the Council on Aging, building an update on what the actual cost would be.
yes, and hopefully those numbers will be in time for your committee to make a good recommendation. The final comment is something in Stephen's report. He's talking about debt, and we do have a significant debt capacity. He does say, and I only raised this point to see if we could get some more information from Stephen on this. He says, we are aware that we have unutilized bonding capacity, but we also note that according to the Massachusetts Taxpayer Foundation, I never could figure out which side they were on. When you were up on the Hill, you probably had the same issue with them. The Chatham taxpayer bears the second highest per capita debt load in the state. And it would be interesting to know what the denominator the Taxpayers Foundation is using. Are they using 6,000 residents or 30,000 residents? Because we have to build infrastructure, or we have to have sufficient infrastructure to accommodate who's in this town year-round. So
I think I think they base that on the residents,
Yeah.
the number of residents, rather than the tax, dividing it up amongst the taxpayers. But that's something we decided today we wanted to take another look at to make sure.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing, because it makes a difference as to how meaningful that statistic is, if it's.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
we are going to look at that again.
Thank you.
You're
Excellent-
welcome.
Excellent report, thank you. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you're welcome. Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Stephen, for putting together, and the committee putting together the report. It was very helpful getting started in the process, obviously. I I'm very pleased to hear your recommendations on the surf boat as well. I think we all had deep concerns of being presented with an infrastructure or capital cost upfront of any policy that the Board of Selectmen has gotten or has gone through with this. I mean, we've still been working through the issues with the Coast Guard, and we haven't thought about, or we haven't talked about the idea of a surf boat. So I'm very happy that you have the same concerns that I've expressed in our last meeting. And I'm happy to say that the rest of the report is, it's very thought-provoking.
Yes, Mr. Chairman does have a way with the words. And you know what? The surf boat issue is an important conflict for us because we're talking public safety. And you hate to wait to assure our boaters or anyone using our waters that they're going to be safe. And yet it takes a while to put together a drastic, which I consider a drastic change like this. So we're torn in both directions.
Well, there's additional costs that are accrued with just when you change a policy such as this, there's going to be a bigger additional cost to this than just a surf boat. So I think that the Select Board needs time to think about exactly what we really want to do as far as addressing this policy change.
We appreciate that, yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis. Mr. Shell.
Hi there, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I have a couple of questions. Let me start with the free cash question. And I appreciate the sort of the philosophical position. I wonder, however, we've had this period of growth in free cash for which there were a number of reasons that really were less related to gathering a pool of cash that was unspent from prior authorizations rather than from new sources, if you will. And what I'm in particular thinking about is the Harwich wastewater payments as an example. My question for you is actually two things. The first is, has the committee given any thought, and perhaps you will if not, to thinking about a maximum so that you have some assurance that there's not more than X in the way of a pool of cash that can be an attraction, if you will, for policymakers. And then the related question is, have you taken a look at all on my understanding is this budget is taking our free cash down from roughly 8 million to, I don't know, 500,000 or maybe less than that, 250, 300, something like that. Have you looked at the uses that are being utilized in this budget in terms of evaluating the propriety of the use of that free cash?
We are trying to figure out, and we won't know for a couple of weeks until we hear about the supplemental articles on town meeting that consider capital spending. But yes, we are quite interested to know where our free cash will be this year if everything is approved that's going to be on the warrant. But we haven't specified what we think, other than we're trying to just make known our objection to more free cash to spend than might be appealing to the taxpayer.
Right.
And our chairman in particular would love to talk to you about that one,
Right.
because he, above all, is very concerned over money being able to be proposed by administrative reasons that might not be money that the taxpayer can afford or should be asked to give at that particular moment because it's free cash.
Okay, we'll continue. We'll
yes.
continue the discussion if that's all right.
Yes, we intend to continue that discussion as well.
Good, good. My other question, I don't think at this point it's any secret that I'm a proponent of the project at 1610 Main Street, and I won't ask any questions. You've rightfully suggested that you're kind of waiting to see what the cost is, and that there is discussion and perhaps some differing points of view on your committee. I would just note that I think the situation today is very different from what it was 2 years ago or 4 or the other times when it had come up, and that it is fair to think about this project as something that is available and possible this year, but beyond that, we're sort of off in the wilderness without a whole lot of options, and I would hope that your committee will take that consideration into account.
Well, it's definitely an opportunity for the town from our point of view, and a wonderful surprise this year to find that that opportunity still is available to us. However, members of our committee and members, taxpayers that we've conversed with still have many ideas about what the Council on Aging building should look like and where it should be. So we haven't studied that. We mentioned this in our report because we don't know when you're talking about the full, all the capital budget issues on the warrant. We don't know what the exact number would be that we should be looking at when we're discussing it and considering whether it's we think a good bet for the taxpayer. So there's still a lot of questions about where it should be. Is this the right place? And what is going to be the cost? And is it affordable for the taxpayer? We have a long way to go on making a decision and a recommendation on that final article.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your views.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joanne, I just want to thank you, the Finance Chair, and the entire committee for your input. The only thing I'm going to make a comment on, I think my colleagues have covered every other article, is the surf-capable boat. I'm extremely frustrated that we're actually in this position to have this conversation, because as myself, Select Board Member Shereen Davis, we've sat in with the Coast Guard on several meetings, and it's painfully clear the tone they've set in our relationship and what they're offering the community versus what they had traditionally years ago. So we'll continue that conversation. Different ears, can be reached out to, but it's frustrating that we're even having the conversation of looking at this boat. So that's my own personal opinion. But
May I respond to that, Mr. Metters?
please.
Yes, and we're also looking at it, again, as a matter of public safety. So it's a very difficult issue to talk about, and there's so many side issues about policy and the Coast Guard and their policies and all of that. But we also have to, those of us who would like to be in favor of this purchase, looking at it because of the public safety of our boaters involved and our residents or our visitors.
I fully agree, and we are also fortunate enough to have current staff that are very well versed in surf management and surf controls and know exactly the risk of being out there, who can guide us better on some of these policies. So we have that benefit to our advantage. So,
And that is what we would like to hear about.
agreed. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Joanne, thank you for being here this evening, and certainly, once again, thanks to Stephen Daniel for his well-written memo that he always writes every year. I have a couple of comments. I do echo some of the sentiments of my fellow Select Board members on the surf boat. We had quite a discussion that evening, and we got some very interesting information from Stuart Smith, our harbor master, and others. We do have a talented set of folks in town that could, I think, handle the surf boat, but there are other policy issues with respect there, too, that we need to work through. So I agree with my fellow Select Board members that, in fact, we have some work to do on policy for the surf boat. I love Stephen's writing, he that one paragraph about, the unknowns, et cetera.
Yes.
Sometimes it's okay to have a little cash lying around for those unknowns. Because,
Yes.
boy, we've had some lightning bolts come out of nowhere of late. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, PFAS, erupted, and, what the heck? Who would have thought that? And that's not, certainly doesn't look as though that's gonna go away. And then we have a water treatment plant for down in South Chatham, where, I forget the numbers of the wells, but, manganese water treatment plant that's, tens of millions of dollars. So we have our capital challenges. But there are a couple of things, I think, going forward that we're gonna really need to kind of address, and it's no surprise that I'm a fan of the Council on Aging, especially when we get gifted $1 million gift, and we perhaps on the back end can repurpose its current facility to affordable housing. I think that's a win-win for seniors and a win-win for affordable housing as well. So I think we hit the nail on the head a couple times on that. Then we have this belt filter press issue that we do need to address. We need to get that on the warrant and so we can get 0% SRF funding, so we really need to get on the warrant so we get 0% funding. That's an absolute no-brainer. And then we have this other article that we'd like to get passed that is, we're gonna create a stabilization fund, if you will, for wastewater. So we have those monies coming over from the IMA from Harwich that we would like to take and sequester and use for wastewater infrastructure, which the investment in which is never ending. It's just never ending. So we have some real near-term needs and then some longer-term needs with respect to wastewater. So we have the conversation with free cash, I think, is an interesting one to have going forward.
Yeah.
We have free cash because we've made some wise business decisions in the
Exactly.
past. But we also haven't spent it unfettered. It's there because we haven't spent it.
That's
So now we have
the chairman's point.
Yeah, well, yeah, and now we have an opportunity perhaps to reinvest that free cash, if you will, in projects that we think are warranted and we'll argue for. So we'll have further discussion on the free cash. It's been a discussion that Stephen and this board and
It's worthwhile.
finance committees, it's for some time, and I think that it's okay to have a little lying around. 3 to 5, I think, is fine. I think the bond folks like to see a little free cash lying around, and 3 to 5 is okay. And again, it's not as though we've been spendthrifts. Okay. I'm not lecturing, I'm just making a point.
I'm listening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The other issue I had, and I'm so happy Mr. Nicastro brought it up, is we do need to revisit the denominator on that one, because I do think it should be over 33,000, not 30,000, because you guys in your wisdom estimated that we have 33,000. It's probably closer to 35 or 40 at times, at July and August. But anyway, because to the very good point, we have created infrastructure for 30,000, 35,000. So that puts undue financial stressors on a municipality. So at times you got to go to debt. I will also note that our debt over the years past has been fairly stable or very stable, and that we've used debt drop-off, I think, very well over the years, so that we haven't overburdened the town with debt. Now, we have some major decisions going forward about some investments that may be critical and we may not have too much choice about. But anyway, and I'll stop there. But again, I appreciate your effort and the Finance Committee's effort. I was honored to be a member of that esteemed group from 86 to 87 years ago, and it's a good group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 points.
Sure.
One, as far as the debt drop-off, that also for those of us supposedly watchdogs for the taxpayers, have to remember that if debt drop-off isn't committed to a future project, then that essentially is supposed to go back to the taxpayer. So there's a little bit of an argument there on our side for that. And to wrap it all up, I think it's not much of a surprise to anyone that about our major issue and concern is ample, pure drinking water. Enough for now and pure for now for all of our taxpayers, and start looking at what the population is going to be in the years to come, and do we have enough wells? Can we build any more wells? And because when you're without clean drinking water, the rest of these just fall, they don't matter that much. It becomes primary.
No argument whatsoever, Joanne. You know that I feel that way. And we've asked the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee to come in with a master plan for water and sewering. We
I
have a
did
master-
see that.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
And Mr. Nacastro and I have repeatedly asked for, an opportunity to see what the opportunities would be to drill more wells. Because I think that's it could be an opportunity to get more water in our tanks. So
And it's something
Yeah.
that takes time.
it does. Takes
And we
planning.
need to figure out 3 years from now, what will be our requirements? How many million gallons per day will this town need to have enough water and pure water? And we need to start thinking about that because it takes time to build wells.
We do have 10 and 11 coming on this fall or midwinter. They're well underway. I don't know if you followed the progression, but they're well underway in South Chatham. So we have 2 more wells that we've never had before that will be coming online. So I think, knock on wood, near term would be okay. But the point is well taken about, do we need even more additional wells? We get it. We get it. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, and I'm prompted here, I don't want to keep you too long,
No,
but
I'm here.
I'm just prompted by some of the colloquy here to note, I think the sensible use of debt from a business point of view focuses not only on the absolute size of the debt, but it focuses also on the return, so to speak. Do we have a quality of life that is being delivered that is an appropriate return notionally for the debt that we're carrying? And I bring that up because I think the finance staff here has done an excellent job of establishing and maintaining that AAA rating. That's a real benefit to Chatham, number one, but to people who want to invest in municipal bonds, that's the gold standard. And as long as we're doing that, that is a kind of an approval rating that's worth taking into account as you consider the question of debt. Obviously, they look at that very carefully as well. So I think that's a measure, that's a metric that is worthy of attention in the total mix. The other thing I would say in terms of the taxpayers, the tax rate has been basically going down over the last 3 or 4 years, and yes, that's a function of real estate values, but real estate values are to some extent a function of what is the quality of the life here in Chatham that's being delivered. So I think those all have to go into the consideration of what's an appropriate level of debt to invest in things that keep us to that high level of quality that we want to maintain.
Thank you. Yes, and it is very important to present Chatham the face that we want the rest of the world to see us, and that is to continue with capital investment and of things that are important to us and what we think as policymakers and committees to think Chatham, it changes. It's going to change. Every town does. But we want it to change for the better and to be beautiful, safe, and a wonderful place to live. But the wonderful thing about New England is we have town meeting. And when we get to town meeting, though we recommend, both the selectmen and the finance committee, the taxpayer will have the final choice about which way they can afford to go. And what, even if they don't always agree with us, they are the people who pay the bills. And they do have a final choice to make at town meeting after listening to both of us and the administration make our recommendations. So what can be better than that? Good old American town meeting. Democracy in action.
America's purest form of democracy, Joanne. It's such
America
a blast.
the beautiful.
Hey, you know what? You know what a great check and balance is? We're all taxpayers too.
That's true.
We are.
And we have a vote.
We do. And we're taxpayers
Only in
too.
America.
I know, I love it. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure
Appreciate it.
talking with you.
Yep. Take care. Have a good evening. Okay, on to our next item on our agenda, which is our continuation of our 2024 budget review and our 2023 annual town meeting articles and notes. So we have I do believe we have Alex Halella. Hello, Alex, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm fine, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good.
Nice
So you're going
to
to
be
run.
back.
Yep, welcome back. You're going to run down the lineup here, Alex, for us, starting with prior year bills, I guess?
Yes, I will. We have quite a few articles for tonight for the select board to review. Some of these are sort of annual articles that you see every year. And we'll start with the prior year bill article. And this year we have a total of $7,788.13 in prior year bills. Quite a few of those were for the online stickers through City Hall systems. We have one mileage reimbursement that came in after the end of the fiscal year, and a couple of others that came in after the end of the fiscal year. So the funding source for prior year bills is free cash, and it requires a 4/5 vote at the annual town meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the invoices.
Mr. Nacastro and then Mr. Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, just one question. On the, it's the fifth one down, ACH fee stickers. What does ACH stand for?
Automatic clearinghouse.
Automatic clearing.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Mr. Shell.
I'm the new guy, so I have to ask this question.
Why?
Well, not why, but what happens if we don't get the 4/5 vote? I mean, is this like the debt ceiling?
It's my understanding, I mean, the town is obligated to pay these bills. The services have been rendered. We received the service and/or the goods. But because it's from a prior fiscal year, it does require, per Mass General Law, it does require town meeting to vote on them separately. We don't have any other source of funding. If it doesn't receive the 4/5 vote, I guess we will just try again at a later town meeting. I've never seen, knock on wood, I've never seen this fail previously. But again, you never know what might happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. The other question I have, Alex, not to be facetious, but what the heck's wrong with City Hall systems? How come they can't cut us an invoice more timely?
That's a good question. You would expect, some of these companies, especially when you get some of the large ones, and
Yeah.
if there is funds remaining, and we reach out to the vendors every single year saying, please send us your invoices. June 30th is coming. They have until July 15th to submit any invoices. But anything that comes in after July 15th, if the funds weren't encumbered, that means, held over to be paid, we legally cannot pay those bills.
Yeah, okay. So we need a motion to place. We're not going to recommend this evening, but a motion to.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
Mr. Chair, if you want to vote to recommend, we can certainly do that tonight.
Are you sure? Because is there going to be any more, you think, Alex? She asked us not to
No.
vote to recommend.
I don't think so. So
Okay.
I think you can recommend tonight.
Okay. A motion to recommend?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you very much, Alex. Okay, on to the next one, which is the Retirement Trust Fund Appropriation Article.
Yes, thank you. This is the second year that you've seen this. Last year, we funded this again at $95,000. And this is for if an employee retires towards the end of the fiscal year and we don't have any, we have salaries have been paid down and we have obligated vacation and/or sick time that needs to be paid out. This can be quite a hit to the budget at the end of the fiscal year. So last year we funded at $95,000. This year we're looking again for another $95,000. We do have a couple, at least one retirement pending in the current fiscal year. So before June 30th. So that will probably take some of the original $95,000. So this would be for next fiscal year in case there's retirements in FY 2024.
So do we have 100, with this funding, do we have 190 in the bucket for these?
If this is funded, yes, and it would be $190,000. However, we do have a pending retirement towards the end of March.
Okay. All right, Mr. Nacastro.
Alex, just one question on the first page of your memo. At the very last line, it says, if all projected projects and articles utilizing free cash are recommended and approved, the free cash balance will be only $246,000. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have built in, well, I had prior years built in at $10,000, so there'd be a little bit more. The capital budget's using 3.4. Dredging, which we'll talk about, is using 300,000. We have the inflation article, which is on for, I think, next week. That's 150,000. This article is 95. The airport article, 61,000. Should the wastewater capitalization fund and transfer into that fund of the 2.265 from the Harwich IMA funds. That's the big hit, as well as the HVAC for the Eldridge Public Library. And we built in a placeholder for housing, but I think that might be repurposed for the library HVAC system.
Yeah, I just don't remember it being this low in prior years. Is that because of the, we're proposing to remove the IMA money from Harwich?
Exactly.
That's the main region, yes. And again, the Finance Committee has raised concerns over the level of free cash.
Yeah.
We do expect free cash to be replenished with one article that was funded through free cash that probably will not be used. That was the Eldridge Garage, was funded through free cash. So if that when that project closes out, that will come back to free cash.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. Okay.
I move to place the article on the warrant, $95,000 for the
Second.
retirement trust fund.
Second.
Okay, and a vote. Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
I move to recommend approval.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to fiscal year budget adjustment article. Alex, take it away.
Okay, this is an easy one. We're asking you just to place this article on the warrant should there be any current year budget adjustments that will be needed at the annual town meeting. We have not identified any right now. Oftentimes, this is to replenish if there's a deficit in the snow and ice budget and there's no other turnbacks within the DPW budget. So again, just asking you to place this on the warrant at this time.
Motion to place, please.
Second.
Okay, vote. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Okay, next on the agenda. Wood waste
All right,
recommendations. We have the revolving articles here coming up. Yeah. No,
Well,
fixed-
next
I'm
I
sorry.
have is the
Fixed
Fixed
salaries.
salaries.
Fixed salaries of elected officials, and I believe that Mr. Nacastro has something to say here.
Mr. Chairman, this is that article where we are all in conflict of interest because we are subject, we would benefit from this, so we have to invoke the rule of necessity that the Ethics Commission calls for. I just took the course again last week. It's much better than the previous course, by the way, but they're still very much taken with their power. So I think we have to first individually declare that we have a conflict of interest and invoke the rule, and then we would take a vote to invoke the rule of necessity, and then we would vote on the article.
Okay,
So I have a conflict because I would benefit from the stipend that's paid to
okay.
me as a select board member.
Aye as well.
Same here.
It's the same here.
Same here. Okay,
I move that we invoke the rule of necessity, Mr. Chair.
okay. and
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as
I
well.
move that we
Okay,
place the article on the warrant.
okay, and a second.
Second.
Very good. Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro? and-
Aye. I
and
move
Mr.
that we
Dyken.
recommend approval.
Okay, Mr.
Second.
Metters? Okay, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye. I
And-
think the
Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
reporter is getting all these motions down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr.
thank the
Nacastro. No,
Ethics
no,
Commission.
no, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, wood waste reclamation facility revolving fund article. And we have
actually, this is
a bunch of
thank you.
revolving funds. Huh?
This is an enterprise fund, not a revolving fund. So the wood waste reclamation facility is the only enterprise fund that the town
right.
of Chatham has.
You're right.
And per Mass General Law, enterprise funds need to be voted every year, and that is the amount that you're authorized to expend. To date, it's at $25,000 in expected revenue, as well as $25,000 in expenditures. And again, the revenue is from the lease of the property, and most of the expenses are for testing for DEP. So again, it's $25,000 for the enterprise fund, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, what does it do? I've been on this,
The,
I've been on the board a long time. What does this do?
Well, the enterprise fund was set up, the DEP required us to do this as a financial assurance that the old T.W. Nickerson stump dump would be cleaned up and returned to the town without any environmental harm. So it's really protection for the town.
Okay. I guess I'm good with that. Okay, Ms. Davis.
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate $25,000 to operate the wood waste reclamation facility. I move to place this on the warrant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro. Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Next,
Move to recommend.
and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. What say you?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Okay, next, we have, let's see, what do we have? Other post-employment benefits OPEB trust appropriation article. Transfer from the overlay surplus. I do have.
Yes, thank you. And just to note that the Board of Assessors has not recommended this yet. So until it's recommended, there really is no funding available unless it was to come from free cash. However, the request has been submitted to the Board of Assessors, and there's plenty of money in the overlay to fund this. So I don't think it will be a problem. If it is, I would come back to the board prior to the warrant closing to make the funding source free cash.
So
Right now,
go ahead, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, go ahead, please.
So right now, the balance in the OPEB trust fund is just over $3.5 million. That was as of January 31st, 2023. For a number of years, we've been funding $150,000 from overlay surplus to go in this, and that is a supplement to the 1.5% surcharge that's on the tax bills that started with the expiration of the land bank that the town adopted, I believe, back in 2021. So annually, we're raising about, well, from the surcharge, $571,000 so far. That was the commitment for this year. And again, $150,000. So we're hoping to fully fund this liability within 15 years.
So I do have a question, Alex, just to your earlier point. So the $707,000 in the overlay fund, is there any reason why we wouldn't bump this up to something like 300 grand?
We need to have enough money remaining in the provision for abatements account to cover any of those abatements that might come in. And there's several, from prior years. We look at that every year. The Department of Revenue wants to make sure that we have enough there to cover. And then, the more that remains there, the less we have to raise next year, which would hit the tax rate.
So I guess my next question is, has the overlay fund increased over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, or has it remained static, or has it gone down?
It goes up and down. We sort of program in about 300 to 350,000 every year, especially when we have a reval year coming in, a revaluation. We would look to increase that. That's not happening for FY 2024. So I believe right now it's just under $300,000 that we have programmed for FY 2024. As we move through the budget and prior to setting the tax rate, the overlay could go up or down, but usually it's between 250 to 350,000 we raise
Okay.
on an annual basis.
Yep, okay, thanks, Alex. Mr. Shell has his hand up.
A couple questions. One is, is there a point in time at which an employee vests in the entitlement to the OPEB benefits? I mean, do they have to work a certain number of years, or how does that work?
Yeah, the OPEB, the other post-employment benefits is for health insurance,
Right.
so it's not retirement. However, yes, employees are not vested until they've worked for 10 years under the Barnstable County system. And this is, our liability is calculated every year based on the number of benefit-eligible employees that the town has, plus your age, and it covers retirees. So this will go up and down. It went up this year. It was lower last year. And it's all based on the actuaries looking at the cost of health insurance too. So that's why it went up this year. Our liability.
But it's also based on their judgment about the population, if you will, that are entitled to benefits there. life expectancy and those kinds of things as well, is it not?
Correct. So, yeah, so
are
it's
you-
how long,
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
no, it is based on life expectancy, how long people will live after they retire, and how long the town will have to pay for those benefits.
Okay, and that's some sort of a calculation that gets certified by somebody that's basically says it's appropriately conservative?
The town goes through the Barnstable County, contracts with Siegel Actuaries. So they're the ones who provide the actuarial study with, and those are available online if you'd like to look at that and their assumptions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Alex, just to Mike's questions, can you explain he's a newbie, but explain, kind of how we fund it every year versus what we're trying to do with this OPEB trust?
The funding the OPEB by the 150,000?
No, what we pay out of pocket from the operating budget to actually fund, this benefit every year for the people that are receiving it, yeah.
Yeah, every year the town, within the benefits budget, we do fund amount for retirees. So it's currently, I believe, the last one was about $670,000 we pay for retiree benefits. And I'd like to point out that retirees pay 50% of their health insurance, which is the minimum that is required by law. So the town did not accept any greater contribution for retirees, but 50% paid by the town, 50% paid by the retirees. And we also require retirees to go over to Medicare as soon as they are eligible.
Yeah. Yeah, so we pay for the operating budget, and under benefits, there's $700,000 that goes out to pay our current obligation for the next year for these folks. And this, we're trying to build a corpus so that after 15 years, it'll actually pay for itself with the earnings. Well, we're trying. And this is an issue that came up, really erupted 5 or 6 years ago, or even 7 years ago. We didn't have a trust, so we created the trust, and and so it's been building up over time, especially with that 1% or 1.5% that we brought over from.
And not all towns are doing this. We're doing it this way. It seems
Not all towns are doing this way. Everybody kind of has their own little spin on it. Some really rich towns borrowed, a whole bunch of money and stuffed it in a trust. Brookline, Wellesley, blah, blah, blah. When they could borrow at, 3% or 2%.
And I assume the rating agencies have a look at this as well.
We love it.
Yes, they do. They've asked us, how are we taking care of this liability? Because it does show up on our balance sheet. And, by funding it every year, and the rating agencies were actually very impressed with the 1.5% that Chatham enacted a couple of years ago. They thought that was a very good move.
Right, good, thank you.
Mr. DeCastro.
I was just going to say on that point, I don't know of any other town that's adopted that approach. I mean, no one else has gone into the legislature and gotten special legislation. Is that correct, Alex, that I'm aware of?
That is correct. And the reason why Chatham was able to do that was that, if you recall, the Cape Cod Land Bank was enacted back in 1990. And only every town adopted it. But then when the CPA came along, the Community Preservation Act, most towns adopted the modified Community Preservation Act, which took place in lieu of the land bank. So only 2 towns, Chatham and Provincetown, had both the 3% surcharge for the land bank and the 3% surcharge for the CPA. And then when the land bank expired in January 2020, right. That's when Chatham decided to repurpose half of that percentage for OPEB.
Yeah, we had the advantage of not having to impose a new tax, and also we were able to give the taxpayers a break. We gave them a 1.5% back.
1.5% back.
I remember having a conversation at that time with a member of the Finance Committee up in Brewster, and they were interested in pursuing it, but I don't think they have. Anyway, thank you, Alex.
Mr. Metters.
I think to that point, I think that was our push to get it through, because there was a reduction in taxes.
Yes.
And that was what kind of pushed it over the finish line.
Yes, we even got a favorable report from the Revenue Department on it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we need a motion to place.
Mr. Chair, I move to place the other post-employee benefits liability trust fund appropriation on the town warrant.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. DeCastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Decken says aye as well. Now, do you want a recommendation this evening as well? Well, you do not,
Yes,
because,
please.
well, okay. The Board of Assessors hasn't weighed in. Is that bothersome at all?
I think if you make the recommendation that we're appropriating $150,000, if the assessors does not vote, if the assessors do not vote to release the $150,000, we will probably come back to you
Okay.
to recommend that it comes from free cash.
Okay, motion to,
So moved, as stated by Alex.
thank you, Mr.
Second.
Shell. Okay, Mr. Metters,
Aye.
Mr. Shell,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you. The next article is the dredging article, our annual appeal to move sand.
Yes, moving right along. It has been an annual article for the past several years. The Natural Resources Department has requested $400,000 for dredging for FY 2024. $100,000 of that is funded in the capital budget article. And then we have a separate article for $300,000 to be presented to town meeting. The reason why we've done this is a couple of reasons. Number one is that the capital budget is usually for items that have a useful life of 5 years and for which borrowing is approved. As you know, with dredging in Chatham, we never know how long it's going to last. So that's why we've been presenting it separately, or at least $300,000 is a separate article. Funding source in this is free cash, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just have a comment.
Go ahead, Ms. Davis, please.
When we had our dredging sort of primer, like a couple months ago, where we sat down and we looked at all the
Yeah, it was
different
great.
things we could be doing. And apparently dredging is the most cost-effective thing to do to deal with the sand issues that we have in the town. So I think that we're doing the right thing in appropriating this money.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Davis. Motion to place.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Second.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Yep, Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Motion to recommend.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye. And we do have a banging going on here. I don't know what's going on. We hear something. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else hears it. Oh, it's upstairs. Okay.
Oh.
All righty. Well, thank you on capital dredging. It wasn't the dredge. Okay. Child care voucher program article. Alex.
Thank you. Yes, the article, again, this is an annual article seeking $100,000 to fund the Chatham Child Care Voucher Program. It's currently administrated by Monomoy Community Services. And if you recall, last year it was increased from $75,000 to $100,000, and we're asking again for that $100,000 for FY 2024. And the payments go directly to the providers for before, after school, as well as licensed childcare and summer camp. And again, it allows assistance to families living and working in Chatham. So again, the proposed funding is through the tax levy. Again, has been factored into the projected tax rate, which remains at this point unchanged to the current rate of $3.88.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, a motion, please, to place.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Motion to recommend, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Florence Selden Preschool Family Support Program article. Wonderfully named.
Yeah, I can take that, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
So this
Goldsmith.
article is seeking to replenish the funds that were appropriated for the first year of the program, and that started in August of 2022. So we're looking to appropriate $180,000 to replenish the $425,000 that was appropriated last year. And this is for preschool payments directly to providers. There's an amount of $10,000 per year for 4-year-olds and $5,000 per year for 3-year-olds. And in the report here, Shauna notes that we have 10 3-year-olds participating and 13 4-year-old children enrolled in the program, and we have 10 licensed providers. So we're very excited about this program. It's working out really well, and we had thought just to replenish it as we're still looking at the demographics. We think that this will cover the cost for the next year.
Thank you, Jill. It'll be interesting to see if the applicants increase. I hope they will increase. It is a great program. Okay, motion to place, please.
So move.
Second.
All righty, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Motion to recommend.
I move to recommend the article enthusiastically.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well, resoundingly. Here we go. The consolidated revolving funds and the airport revolving fund articles. Alex, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, we have, there's 2 articles for the revolving funds. We've separated out the airport revolving fund from the other consolidated revolving funds. So first of all, the consolidated revolving funds, the town has 5 revolving funds that we need to authorize approval of the spending limit each year. So the first is the Bassett House revolving fund at $8,000. That is the same level as in FY 2023. The Inspectional Services revolving fund, which is requesting an increase to $150,000. The recycling revolving fund at $5,000. The Marconi Station revolving fund at $10,000. And the Waterway User Fee, or WOOF, revolving fund, also an increase to an authorized expenditure not to exceed $1 million. Important to note that any expenditures, regardless of the amount limited, the limits on the amount, there has to be enough revenue within the funds to support that. So if there, for example, with the WOOF revolving fund, if there's only $500,000, even though the limit might be $1 million, we could only spend $500,000. So again, the increase, and that's quite a large increase from $500,000 to $1 million, but that's for anticipated upcoming projects like 90 Bridge Street, the Fish Pier, and other similar projects. So I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the revolving funds.
Ms. Davis.
So on the Waterways User Fee Revolving Fund, Jill, can you explain to us the process of approval for those funds when they're requested?
Sure. So the project that's identified, typically by staff, moves through the committee review process. I just don't have it in front of me. I believe it's the Waterways Advisory Committee and
Lydia's vote.
Lydia's Cove. Yeah, Lydia's Cove. However, it does not get vetted through the Shellfish Advisory Committee. And so with that, the staff makes a recommendation to the committees review it, but they don't necessarily have to recommend it, and then it comes to the town manager for approval. So there's only been, I believe, 1 project that's gone through that process.
So you have the final approval on the,
Yes.
on the funds? Okay. So this is an increase of from $500,000, which is significant, and understandably so, in the fact that, the capital funds for all of our waterfront
Waterfront.
projects
Projects,
have somewhat gone over budget, or there's been unexpected costs for whatever reasons. And of course, it was appropriated a very long time ago, so costs do increase, and that's understandable. And in this memo, it's mentioned that the expenses can be anticipated for upcoming projects like 90 Bridge Street and the Fish Pier and similar projects. I want to support this, and I will support this, but I want to make it clear that we have to keep in mind that, that the 90 Bridge Street and Riders Cove and Barn Hill are still pending projects on the waterfront. And that we need to be mindful that there's not some sort of creep into this fund to get more of this and more of that, because the funding's available, without keeping in mind that there is actually, these bigger projects that are going to need some funding along the way. It's of concern that we are able to go forward with the understanding that or an understanding to the committees and the town manager that the appropriating this money should have a bigger like lens on those capital projects. Because that would be the only reason we'd be increasing this funding that I
Well,
see.
Okay, I think good point and good questions. I was somewhat concerned with an increase in 500,000, not that I don't think our waterfront needs investment and reinvestment, but we only spent 7,000 this year, and we're asking for an increase of 500,000. So I think it's in anticipation of improving what? Because, and then what can we draw it down for in a year, in any given year, Alex? Just a question for you, Alex. Are we constrained at a $500,000? Are we capped at 500K, or now we can spend up to $1 million now?
Yeah, the authorization would be to spend up to $1 million. As of June 30th, there was $1.4 million in the fund, and I don't have off the top of my head. I know that we just collected a whole bunch more after the mooring permits came in January.
Yeah.
So again, it's the maximum that we can expend. If there isn't that much money in the account, then we will not expend it. And as Jill mentioned, there's a process for the approval.
And is there, just a follow-up question, is there an issue with Shellfish not being involved in this, Ms. Davis? I think you brought it up.
Yeah, I've had a big concern about them not being part of this, vetting and approval. They have a voice in the process, but they don't have a vote. And so they seem to be sometimes the stepchild in the room, for a lack of a better kind of understanding, is that they're at the whim of what bigger decisions are being made at waterways. I'm not saying that it's unfair or not. I'm just saying that, there has been, from what I've seen, and I've said to the chair, had considerable concern about that they don't have a voice at the table, a significant voice at the table. They are, they have a couple big projects of their own that could be funded by this. Number 190 Bridge Street,
Yeah.
but the Upweller propagation projects, many things that could be utilized. And it's a very heavy, we're looking at what has been funded is docks, swim floats, and things that are, somewhat benign, but sometimes the docks are put into areas that are resource areas, and that's caused some concern for the shellfish community, and they didn't get a say at the table. They didn't get a say that was going to be a problematic expenditure. So I just I personally would like to see them be able to have a say in the matter.
Well, Ms.
But
Davis.
That's an article of town meeting.
Correct.
Okay, but it could be an agenda item for discussion here, and then an actual warrant article if we so
Sure.
desire. Okay.
Yeah, let's do
So
it.
I think that you just articulated a future agenda item, and I just asked Jill to please note it. Mr. Nacastro.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there was a proposal to
think we
amend
did.
the bylaw to include that. I don't know if it ever went to town meeting, or was
No.
withdrawn?
No.
No.
It was withdrawn.
Okay, because this is all enshrined in the bylaw. And initially, the on Lydia's Cove wasn't going to be included in the original proposal.
Right.
And then that was added before the bylaw was adopted.
Yeah.
Well, Shireen brings up an excellent point. They're an integral part of the waterfront, and they need to be involved in the consideration of how we spend the money. Mr. Metters.
No, and I've had many conversations with people about the, Wolf Fund and how it should be used or should not, how it's been used, how it should be used, how we collect the money, how it's been reviewed, and more so the process of the review. Who are the players, because like on Lydia's Cove, they haven't met for quite some time, so if they were presented with a request for input, they would obviously have the opportunity to meet, but they're not obligated, and none of these committees are obligated to make a
Right.
recommendation, but I do think we need to kind of maybe refine or just kind of clarify what our intentions are, because, the projects that have been used for, I'm not crystal clear if we followed all the steps, to be honest with you. So I just want to make sure that, we do this because we're talking $1 million. We have an $11+ million bond
Sure.
article that went out there that will no way, shape, or form cover everything on our wish list. So, this is going to have me more of a delicate conversation. I'm sure we're going to get future comments as we bring this forward, but I will support it. I just want to be very cautious that we do this in a proper manner and that we get the proper review to get the proper results that we're all looking for.
I think it's up to us to decide as the board and not the committee itself. The committee has talked about it, but hasn't.
But we need to be clear to the committees on a timetable,
Absolutely.
like, boom, like, you know, we're gonna put this out for review. You guys want to input, give us input. You guys have to meet in this certain timetable, and this is your opportunity.
The chair of the Shellfish Advisory Committee is extremely structured and timely in his meetings.
No, Waterway meets regularly, South Coastal Harbor meets regularly, Shellfish. I know Aunt Lydia's Cove is on a bit of a hiatus right now, but I'm sure they're optimistic here.
Okay, thank you. I see Dr. Bob has his hand raised, or did, now it's gone. Dr. Bob, did you want to speak or not?
Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple of comments that were being made with the discussion about the WOOF. First of all, with regard to the Shellfish Advisory Committee and their input, there was an article that was proposed back for the 2020 annual town meeting, which ended up being withdrawn because of the COVID issue at the time and the desire to scale back the warrant.
Yep.
There was then discussion this fall over the last couple of months about bringing that article back with a request to place it on the warrant. That was reviewed and discussed at Shellfish Advisory Committee meetings and with the chair, and their decision was not to move that article forward. So they were provided that opportunity, and the chair informed me, and I subsequently informed the town manager that they were not going to move forward with that article. Second thing I just wanted to comment on, the reason why the request is being made to increase the amount that we can spend in any 1 year from 500 to 1,000 is
Million.
recognition. We do have several large ticket items either under construction currently or coming before the town shortly. The most significant one being 90 Bridge Street. The last time that project was estimated, it was somewhere between a $4 and a $5 million project to do everything, including the building, as well as the upweller facility. Now, keep in mind, the WOOF fund can only be used for capital purposes. So we can't necessarily use the WOOF for, buying the tanks for the upweller and the pumps and things like that. We can, however, use it for the pilings and the platform upon which the new Coast Guard boathouse will sit to house the upweller. We can use it for the bulkhead. So we can use it for various purposes, but we can't just use it, willy-nilly for insignificant items, if you will. It's very specific in the article or in the language of the revolving fund what it can be used for. One of the things we can't use it for, which there was discussion when it was first created, is dredging and beach nourishment, because of the fact that those things have as Alex alluded to earlier, a relatively short lifespan, if you will, as opposed to a capital project. So our request was to raise it up to $1 million specifically because we did have some of these larger projects coming forward, and we wanted the flexibility, and I highlight that flexibility to offset some of the costs for those projects through the WOOF. Doesn't mean we will or we have to, but it provides the opportunity to do that. So with a project like 90 Bridge Street that may be a $4 or $5 million project, we're looking at potentially $1 million coming out of the WOOF, potentially $1 million Seaport Economic Council grant, and that will significantly then reduce the cost of that, which would have to be funded primarily from the waterfront bond or potentially a separate article. So we have that flexibility. It doesn't say we spend $1 million for 90 Bridge Street, but we could if the project was ready to go and it was deemed appropriate after all the various committees have weighed in, and offered their input on whether or not they support it or not. And just so we're all clear, it's the Waterways Advisory Committee, the Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee, and the South Coastal Harbor Plan Committee that have the opportunity to weigh in on the WOOF. So really, the only one that isn't is the Shellfish Advisory. And as I said, we did offer them, and obviously, if they want to resurrect that, and your board feels there is an opportunity to have that conversation before the warrant is closed, I'd be happy to bring that proposal back before you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Bob. Thank you, Dr. Bob. Ms. Davis?
So I have talked to the chair about the circumstances of the vote that they took in February, and we have talked about it. He did not feel that he was comfortable bringing it forward. I won't say for what reasons he felt that, but he did express that to me. Since they did take the vote, though, I want to note that the circumstances have changed around funding for our capital projects. That was back in the fall. This is now we're heading into a town meeting. And as Dr. Duncanson had related, it's coastal, it's Aunt Lee's Cove, and it's waterways. And there's Shellfish Advisory not a part of the process. So I think we are better served as the board to evaluate the merit of that warrant going on town meeting and, have an agenda item to discuss it. And I think that if any of the committees or citizens want to weigh in on that we'll have I'm requesting that agenda item.
Yeah, no, we've got it.
Okay.
Thank you, Shereen.
All right.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you, Alex. Any further discussion? Mr. Shell?
Not really and probably this was implicit in or stated in your description, Jill, but I just want to be clear that the ultimate decision on spending anything out of this fund will be ours. We will have the final say? No.
Jill?
Jill has the final, okay.
Jill has final say.
Okay.
Yep. We good? Mr. Nacastro?
Mr. Chairman, I move we place the article for the consolidated revolving funds for Bassett House Inspectional Services, Recycling, Marconi Station, and Waterways user fee on the warrant. But I do note, Alex, that in the second line of the actual article, the date is wrong. It should say July 1, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro.
Thank you, I'll make that correction.
Okay, and a
Second.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Aye.
Michelle? Mr.
Aye.
Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. The Airport Revolving Fund, Alex?
Move to recommend.
Oh, I'm sorry, move to recommend, Mr. Nacastro?
Second.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Then moved and placed and recommended. Okay. The Airport Revolving Fund, Alex, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep, the Airport Commission is requesting the same amount in FY24 as in FY23 of $150,000, and that's based on their anticipated revenues. So again, this would cover any of their expected expenses and matching funds for any anticipated grants in FY 2024. Again, unchanged, we have segregated the Airport Revolving Fund for the past several years now, and it requires, again, it is recommended by the airport commissioners, and again, the expenditures are processed through the accounting office and requires both the approval of the town manager and the finance director.
Okay, Alex. Any,
Move to place.
Second.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye. I move to recommend.
Move to recommend.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.
folks. Okay. Is that it, Alex?
That's it
Okay,
for
this
tonight.
evening. Yep, thank you for tonight. Thank you, Alex. Okay, our next agenda item is an appointment to the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission. And Sean is not here, so perhaps, Jill, you can take this one away a little bit?
Sure, Mr. Chair. So it's taken some time for the National Seashore to be able to make these appointments. So it's a two-pronged process. One is where we receive a nominee and we make a recommendation, and then the person has to also file a request, and it's through the Federal Register. So it's a really interesting process. So before you tonight is a recommendation to have Thomas Dougherty Doherty,
Doherty, yep, Tom
sorry,
Doherty.
Thomas.
Yep.
To serve as the member, and we were also looking for Ted Keon, our Director of Coastal Resources, can serve as the town's alternate representative. And meetings typically take place over at the Cape Cod National Seashore.
Super. Mr. Nacastro, and then,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Doherty interviewed with us, I think, for the planning board, but he expressed an interest in any committee that we thought he could be helpful. So when this came through, I brought it up to Shauna and suggested that she reach out to him, and he was very interested in doing this. And I think we all felt he was a good candidate for a committee when we interviewed him.
I think we did, yeah.
So I'd like to move to nominate Thomas Doherty as the town's voting representative and Ted Keon as the town's alternate representative for the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission.
Second.
Super. Any comments? Any other further comment? Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Congratulations, Mr. Doherty. It's been moribund or not even active for the last 2 or 3 years. I think, President Trump in his wisdom, I think, nuked it, and then President Biden in his wisdom brought it back. Okay. Sorry. The last item in the agenda, our committee appointments this evening. This evening, we have appointments for Energy and Climate Action and for the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'll take nominations for the Energy and Climate Action Committee. We have one vacancy to June 30th, 2024, and one vacancy to June 30th, 2025. We interviewed 4 different candidates, Bruce Everett, Joe Kitts, Diane Dede Holt, and Adriana Livolo. And we'll take, put names in motion here. Mr. Metters.
Sure. I'd like to nominate Adriana Lavallo.
I think it's Livolo.
Lavallo.
Okay.
To the Energy and Climate Action Committee until June 30, 2024, unless sooner revoked or successor is appointed.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Nacastro.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Joe Kitts for this position.
Okay.
I don't know how to do this.
Well, in order to even vote for Mr. Kitts, someone needs to second it, and it needs to be you.
Sorry, I'm not going to.
Okay, all right.
Second.
Okay. All right, so
Process question.
process question.
I would prefer Adriana Livolo be nominated for the vacancy June 30th, 2025.
And you vote against her for this one. Right? Yeah.
So will you accept another
Well,
nomination?
Well, I'm sorry, but we do have a motion and a second to nominate her, so we'd have to nuke that one. We'd have to defeat it and then have another motion to say 25, or you can change your motion and change it,
Okay, can I,
please. Or you can change your motion to
all right,
2025.
I don't want to overcall, can I amend my motion?
Yeah,
Can I amend my motion until 2025?
yes.
All right, let's just keep it nice and simple.
Okay, and then we need a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shell. Mr. Nacastro.
If we're dealing now with the 2025 position,
Solely.
okay, so I am going to withdraw my motion for Mr. Kitts, and I have a second name that I'd like to put forward for this position. So
Okay.
I nominate Bruce Everett for this position.
Yes, it does. Okay. All right, so a vote on Ms. Livolo for the June 30th, 2025, okay? Mr. Metters?
Yes.
Yep, Mr. Shell?
Yes.
And Ms. Davis?
Yes.
And Mr. Nacastro?
Yes.
And Mr. Dyken says yes as well. We have one more appointment for June 30th, 2024. Ms. Davis?
I move to appoint Diane Dede Holt to the Energy and Climate Action Committee for the vacancy to June 30th, 2024.
I'll second that. Mr. Nacastro?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Bruce Everett for this position.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we're going to go around the table here, and you're going to voice your, you're going to vote for either Mr. Everett and/or Ms. Holt, Dede Holt. Mr. Metters?
Mr. Everett.
Mr. Shell?
Dede Holt.
Ms. Davis?
Dede Holt.
Mr. Nacastro?
Bruce Everett.
And Mr. Dykens will vote for Dede Holt. Okay. Here we go. Okay, Zoning Board of Appeals is next. We had a resignation of David Thompson on February 9th, and so we need to have an alternate, or I should say an associate, ascend to fill David Thompson's position. But, okay, and then also this evening, I would like to postpone the vote on, as a liaison of the ZBA, I'd like to postpone the vote on the two associates. We have another candidate that has approached Mr. Nixon and is very interested in being interviewed for the ZBA. So I would like to hopefully postpone, hopefully folks are in agreement that we could postpone that particular piece of action for this evening. Mr. Metters and
Yeah,
then
and
Mr.
I also like to just get complete clarification on one of the candidates, because I know there was some correspondence after the interviews from the previous candidates
Okay.
suggesting that they may want to be on one committee or another, and I haven't found that in my emails, so I would like clarification on their follow-up correspondence with the town. All completed, all of it.
I'm not sure I can provide that this evening, but, okay.
Yep, which I know Shauna was,
Okay.
Is that for the alternate or for the
this was
the
from,
main person?
Mr. Gilmore sent some follow-up correspondence after the initial interviews. And I just want to get clarification on those follow-up correspondence to clarify his preference of committees, because it differs from what I have in the packet here, my memory.
Okay, all right, so we'll get that clarified. Okay, so we need a nomination for Mr. Shell.
I move to appoint Randy Potash to the Zoning Board of Appeals until June 30, 2025, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
Second.
Yeah, okay. All right, a vote. Any other nominations, I should say? Hearing none, a vote. Mr. Metters.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken's a resounding aye. Okay, Randy Potash has filled the position for David Thompson. And we will schedule an interview for another candidate for the associate position as soon as possible. Okay?
Motion to adjourn?
You bet. A second.
Second.
Thank you. What say you, Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Good night, Chatham. Thank you.